Hey guys, John P here. Today I'm going to be sharing with you 5 things that watch brands do not want you as a collector or a consumer to know. These are going to be some things that I have picked up over the years, not only working with brands a little bit, very limited, but mostly by working with other people in the watch industry, veterans, other fellow dealers, collectors, and so on and so forth, because I'm very fortunate to have Delray Watch, where we buy, sell, and trade watches. We've kind of, Federico, my business partner, and I at Delray Watch, we've kind of been in this segment that's developed over the years. And when we started, the industry was not too friendly to pre-owned. Today, it seems like across the board, most brands have their hands in it in some capacity to some extent. But when we started, pre-owned was kind of looked at as inferior or kind of directly opposing the brands. Today, I think there's a bit of a different stance, certainly, but that's where it was. And so because of that, I learned some things along the way about how the watch business for new watches really works sometimes. Kind of got to look behind the curtain, kind of like a Wizard of Oz. You look behind the curtain, you're like, this is the Wizard of Oz. And yes, I'm going to share with you those secrets. But of course, please do not forget to check out delraywatch.com, where we buy, sell, trade. We have so many cool watches, and I think you'd really enjoy them. We focus on consumer enthusiast brands. So if you're looking for something, maybe not Rolex, Patek, AP, we have a little of that, but other stuff, the deal, Delray Watch. On the wrist today, I actually have back on the wrist my titanium Omega Seamaster Aquaterra Good Planet 38.5 size. I really like it. Very cool watch that I like to kind of throw in the rotation. So the first thing that the brands do not want you to know, and this is not every brand that's going to be guilty of this, but there are a lot of brands that may not either make all of their watches or some of their watches. When you get into the micro brands, most of them, I would say very comfortably, are using contract manufacturers. Very common. You go to Switzerland, there is a contract manufacturer for every piece of a watch: straps, buckles, clasps, bracelets. A lot of bracelets come out of Germany, go figure. But cases, all kinds of different things, modules. And so sometimes brands, they will use one of these manufacturers to either design a watch in the same styling aesthetic of the brand and just make it from the ground up, and then do a limited release. If it takes off, great, add it to the collection, move on. Some brands are even kind of guilty of doing press releases, see how people respond to the press release, and then make the watch later. So there are brands that will not produce the watch. They'll tell the same story. Oh, this is our, artisan workshop with the watchmakers, this and that. And some of that, we start talking independence and, certainly, over that $5,000 price point, it gets into the range where, the likelihood of them making more of the watch totally in-house increases. But largely, a lot of things are shopped out, and sometimes the whole watch. So brands, they're not going to tell you that. Very few brands, with the exception of micro brands, will even touch on this. Now, this takes us into the next thing, and this is, I cannot wait until the brands just stop this whole ruse. It's ridiculous for anyone that spends more than 15 minutes per day or per month really looking at watches on the internet. And this is Inhouse Calibers. The movements that are claimed to be in-house are not always in-house. Now, they can call it in-house, but it's like, what does that mean, right? Does that mean something different to everyone? And that's kind of where you get into the word games. Now, to give you an example, Tag Heuer is a brand that's done a lot of this, and I can understand why, because you have companies like Sellita, like ETA that produce the ETA movements. Well, when ETA with the ETA movements, when the patents on those design, the architecture, the 2824 and the 2892, when those expired and kind of that architecture was opened up to the public, you had this influx, Sellita being the first, but there's so many others, right? Even Fossil Group that owns STP, they produce, ETA equivalents. And so you have Sellita, and Tag Heuer calls it, Caliber 11, for example. Well, Caliber 11 is really a Sellita SW300 with a Dubois de Praz module for the chronograph function on top of it. So they're using this other company to get the module, and they put that module in there on top of this other movement and connect it to the gear train. And that way, now they have a chronograph that's based on an off-the-shelf movement. Call it the Caliber 11. It's, hey, this is our Caliber 11. Now, this is going to be strategic from their end because they can swap out that SW300 with an alternative, which is really a 2892 in the root of it all, an ETA 2892. So they could swap that out with anyone else that makes a 2892 architecture in the future. Salida's headquarters gets hit with a tornado, like what I believe really just happened a few weeks ago. Okay, well now there's a supply shortage. We'll just pop out, with an actual 2892, or Lejeune Perret, which I believe makes a 2892 architecture movement as well, and then pop the module on it, call it we're still caliber 11, because they don't guarantee to you, oh, we're basing this on the Salida. This isn't something they're telling you. This is our caliber 11, and they can kind of, caliber 11 today might be a different caliber 11 than yesterday, and it might be even different in the same batch of watches for the same run. So that's something they're not going to tell you. I would love to see them tell you this, because it's the truth, it's reality, and anything else, people are going to know. Collectors, I'm telling you, it's fluff. People are going to catch on. They're going to be like, that's ridiculous, caliber 11. Come on, this is a SW300 with a module. Interesting. I don't really think it matters at the end of the day. Probably a more reliable movement, but something that you need to consider, and they're not telling you. Now that takes us into something with the auction houses. Now I don't want to, talk too much about this, because the auction houses oftentimes get stuck in a hard place, right? They might have a limited staff that really knows watches. People that are really great with watches generally leave the auction houses and move on to opening up a roof over their own shop and doing their own thing, because they know so much. The auction houses, quite honestly, from what I understand, this is, really just what I've heard, they don't pay the same type of, salary that you would get on your own or working for a company that's a little bit more volume focused. So regardless, auction houses will sell watches to the brands at auctions. Now what this means, let me clarify this. Brands will bid up and actually bid on auctions of watches that they want to be in their museum, or they want to base a future watch off of the heritage collection. So they'll bid up these prices that we saw over the last 5 years. I'm not going to say which brands do this, but there was some kind of buzz about this Omega whole debacle with the Frankenstein, right? And so, we're not going to get into the nitty gritty here or point fingers, but this is something to look out for, is that when you see these big ticket or these big hammer prices at auction houses, sometimes it could be a brand that is bidding it up, and they get into a bit of a bidding war. And so it's always good to keep in mind that when you see a hammer price, who's the buyer? What's the reasoning? And why did it fetch such a premium? Why did they have to have it? Was it because a brand wanted to just expense it as a marketing expense, get the tax benefit for that and put it in the Heritage Museum, and also keep it, out of the hands of a collector that can, sell it on their own and set the market price, or they want to set the market price themselves because, oh, hey, look, we just have this $1 million original watch. Why don't you buy the one we just came out with that looks like this one, but we'll sell it to you for $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 as a reissue or a tribute? Kind of smart, if you ask me, but that's something that they're not going to tell you. Now, last, this takes us into celebrities, and brands are very quick oftentimes to put celebrities on their homepage, oftentimes very quick to throw big, elaborate parties and invite, the media, invite celebrities, invite the celebrities' friends and the friends and the friends and the friends of celebrities. That's something that they do. You see this in the mid-range watches all day. It's just something that happens, right? And so they're not going to tell you that oftentimes they're paying these celebrities a ton of money to wear their watch. And it might not be the watch that they even want to wear. There's plenty of celebrities that are fully endorsed by the brands on the front page of the brand's website, go to all the parties, wear the watches in the movies, and then in their personal life, you see them wearing a Richard Mille, you see them wearing a Vacheron, you see them wearing something that they like instead. Now, it doesn't mean that they don't like that watch brand, but certainly there's a very high pay-to-play component here. And this is something that the brands aren't going to tell you, right? Like, why would a brand tell you, hey, we're paying this guy to wear our watch? No, they're going to use their likeness, their image, slap it on the website and say, hey, Jim Clooney is, wearing our watch. Isn't that cool? I don't care. I like the watch if I like the watch, but that's something they're not going to tell you. Most of you, I think, probably have caught on to this, but those of you that are maybe a little bit newer to watch collecting, this is something that happens across the board, widespread. So guys, this has been me sharing 5 things that watch brands really don't want you to know. Sure, the information's out there. Some of these things maybe you've heard elsewhere, but I want to reiterate, and I also think videos like this kind of help the watch collector community and spread awareness, because I don't like to see when people, kind of catch a brand doing something misleading, right? Like I think I like watches. I like the watch industry. It's not my fault that there's people with antiquated thinking at some of these brands that want to kind of gatekeep how the industry works when all the information is available to anyone that spends a few minutes looking online. So that's kind of my perspective. This is in no way me trying to place a divider between me and the brands. I think this is actually helpful for the brands to be more transparent. I just see transparent brands today doing so well as kind of information spreads. The internet becomes, almost entirely accessible by everyone. I think it's good for the industry. Let me know what you think. Comments below. Guys, once again, don't forget to check out DelrayWatch.com, where we don't have any celebrities, but maybe we should think of putting one there. If you are one, reach out, I guess. And we'll see you next time. You've been chatting with John P.